This is our fifth session on the providence of God, and we have focused on definitions. We've focused on providence over all things, including weather and nature and disease and disability and life and death and Satan. And now I want us to turn to God's providence, His pervasive, sustaining, governing, ordering of all things in relation to the decisions, the volitions, the will of human beings. How pervasive is God's providence over our will and our actions? Proverbs 16:9. The mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. So it's good and right to be a planner, but don't ever think your planning is the decisive determination of the outcome. The mind of man plans his way, the Lord directs his steps. Or Proverbs 20:24, man's steps are ordained by the Lord. How then can man understand his way? There's a mystery in the providence of God over our steps. Jeremiah 10:23, I know, O Lord, that a man's way is not in himself, nor is it in a man who walks to direct his steps. Proverbs 19:21, many plans are in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord will stand. Proverbs 21:1, the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. Or if you even focus in on the evil, hurtful decisions that people make, are they under the control of God's providence? Listen to 1 Peter 4:19. Therefore, those who suffer, Christians who suffer, according to the will of God, shall entrust their souls to a faithful Creator in doing good or doing what is right. Another one, 1 Peter 3:17, for it is better if God should will it so that you suffer for doing what is right rather than doing what is wrong. And in both of those texts in 1 Peter 4:19 and 3:17, it's clear from the context that the suffering they're talking about that may be God's will or may not be God's will, may happen according to God's will or may not happen, is suffering caused by the sinful persecution of other people. Here's the key text on the providence of God over the sinning deeds of man. Acts chapter 4, verse 27 and 28. Truly in this city, that is Jerusalem, there were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles and the peoples of Israel, to do whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place. This is really important. Herod, Pilate, mocking Gentile soldiers, crowds of Jews crying, crucify him, crucify him. Those four people are mentioned here as doing what God's hand and plan predestined to take place, and all of it was sin. Now, when I read my Bible, and I am so moved to trust my Bible because of what I see of God and Christ in it, my mind often says, okay, I got to do a brain check here. I got to alter some categories here because the fallen man, including me, we don't bring to the Bible the conceptions in our mind that we need in order to grasp the depths of the Bible. We get to adjust those conceptions. Here's an adjustment. We have to have in our brain this category. God is able to will that sin should happen without himself sinning. Is that category in your brain? If it's not, it needs to be there, because that's what this text assumes is in your head. It is designed to put it in your head. You don't bring your brain to the Bible and adjust text. You bring the text to your brain and adjust your brain. God is able to will that sin happen, without himself sinning. Now, how should we talk about this? Let me just give you one story and we'll be done with this session. And you all know this story probably, the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. What happens to him? He has these dreams. The brothers are really mad at him. They don't like him. And so they take an opportunity and throw him into a pit, which is, of course, sin, to throw their brother into a pit. And then they sell him into slavery. And then, as a righteous man in the house of Potiphar, his wife lies about him, that he tries to rape her, and he didn't. And so Potiphar throws Joseph into jail. He's there for a long time. We don't know how long. He tells some dreams. They come true. The butler, he says to him, "Remember me, so you get me out of this prison." He forgets him for 2 more years. And finally, he remembers him, and he becomes the vice president of Egypt over the entire nation under Pharaoh. And his brothers come down for food, and they meet, and he recognizes them. 22 years have gone by between the throwing of Joseph into the pit and his saying of these words. He's trying to encourage the brothers that when their father is gone, Joseph won't take vengeance on them. And this is what he says, chapter 50, verse 20. "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Now, look carefully at these words. It does not say, "You meant evil against me, but God used it for good." That is not what it says. I have heard it paraphrased that way many times, but it avoids the clear, powerful, crucial teaching. It says there were 2 intentions, 2 meanings going on in your sinful treatment of me. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. There's the category we have to have in our minds. When Christ died, Pilate meant it for evil. Herod meant it for evil. The soldiers meant it for evil. And the crowds, of course, meant it for evil. God didn't mean it for evil. God wasn't sinning at that moment. God was saving us from sin at that moment. We would never be saved from hell and from sin and from guilt into eternal joy if God were not, in his providence, completely omnipotent over the wills of sinful people. So, how do we talk about it? When something evil is done to us, every single time the child of God can say, "You meant it for evil, God meant it for good," which is just another way of paraphrasing Romans 8:28, right? We know that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose, even sinful acts against us. So the gift of providence over the wills of sinning people to us is that we can be sure though they meant it for evil, God always means it for good.